Allora, c'è Jarnail, here there's Jarnail Chuj and Emily Green, that is the assistant of Amos Miller. C'è Jarnail e Chuj e Emily Green, che è l'assistente di Amos. E Amos purtroppo non si sta riuscendo a collegare, ha dei problemi di connessione, per cui proverò a continuare ad annetterlo e vediamo come va. I'll try to help him to enter in our Zoom session, and maybe we can start with Jarnail and Emily. E con noi c'è Emanuele Esposito che si occuperà della traduzione.
Buonasera.
Hello, Jarnail. It's a real pleasure to have you, Microsoft, both from USA and UK, right?
Yeah, thank you, Stefano. It's our honor and a privilege to be with you today.
Sorry, we are a little bit late. Scusa, cosa vai pure con la traduzione?
No, era solo molto contento e ci salutava.
Ok, sorry, we are a little bit late. We'll start very soon. Abbiamo due contenuti d'eccellenza. Uno sarà un tour virtuale al Microsoft Inclusive Tech Lab. Poi spiegheranno nel video di preciso di cosa si tratta, in modo molto migliore rispetto a quanto potrei fare io adesso. Poi nella seconda parte, nella seconda sessione, avremo invece una panoramica su Microsoft Soundscape, una nuova tecnologia, e vedremo anche, andremo a scoprire di cosa si tratta. Per questi due interventi, allo stesso modo, è stato preregistrato il video, in modo da avere la traduzione in italiano, e perciò io partirei subito con il primo contenuto.
The Inclusive Tech Lab was created back in 2017, specifically to be an embassy for people with disabilities. We very much wanted to have a space that was dedicated to and for people with disabilities, not about people with disabilities. So this is a gathering space for members of the disability community within Microsoft, as well as the broader disability communities in the world. We've had about 7,000 people come through our tours in person and hundreds virtually. We find that having this in-person interaction with folks really helps land the inclusive design principles that we embrace here. Now, obviously, we're having to adapt as much as possible right now because of current conditions. And so we're trying our best to give you that in-person experience virtually. So that's why we're doing this whole wonderful live cam show. We have also hosted scores of public relations events, marketing events, and dozens of design sprints with various teams during that time. Now, the Inclusive Tech Lab was originally an Xbox program. And during the different shuffling of hardware back and forth between Xbox and Surface, we now live in the Surface organization. But we are very proud of our gaming roots. We are gamers ourselves. We love gaming. Gaming is really where we first approached, from a hardware standpoint, dedicated accessible hardware. So what is that? Well, it's the Xbox Adaptive Controller. Now, how did we get to it? We wholeheartedly believe these are the best game controllers in the market, but they are built and designed on a number of assumptions. The first one being that you have the strength to hold it, that you have the grip endurance to continue to hold it, and that you have 10 fingers with which to reach all of the various buttons and joysticks. Now, for gamers like myself who do not meet those assumptions, this controller becomes the disability. So to address that, over the years, various members of the community have hacked together controllers that are more usable to gamers with disabilities. And that's what you see on the wall behind me. This is from Special Effect in the UK that did amazing work cutting and hacking and gluing and creating custom controller options for people with disabilities. And these are some of the wonderful stories that they've shared here. We have individuals with cerebral palsy, spinal cord injuries. It runs the gamut. And these folks are now able to game based on the custom work that Special Effect has done. But that's the problem with that solution, is it's custom work, usually by a very small dedicated group of individuals. There's no readily accessible universal option available. And that's where Microsoft stepped in. So going through a number of different hackathons and things like that, we came up with the adaptive controller, which, according to the system, is exactly the same as the traditional controller. It knows no difference. The difference is in the interface. So what we've designed here on the back are a number of switch ports that coincide, as you can see there, to the various controls of a standard controller. And what this allows us to do is easily build a gaming system, build controls and access around the gamer, rather than asking them to adapt to our arbitrary design. What's fantastic about this as well is because it's made by us, it's always available, it's inexpensive, it's not custom, it's easy to use out of the box, which was a huge ask for the community when we were developing this. Because a lot of those wonderful mom and pop shops, small, dedicated group of folks in their garages, if something happened, if they had to shut down business, all of a sudden you've got a system that's no longer supported. So that's one of the big pieces we went with here, is to make sure that we had a system that was supported universally. Response has been fantastic. It's now launching in a number of other countries, and it continues to roll out. So I'd like to now, we're going to transition and actually show you how it works connected to a system and how we can make the adjustments digitally to complement the physical adjustments when we're attaching different buttons and switches. So this will be our first of many sort of raw camera transitions. So just bear with me as we reposition things and move around the lab. There's going to be a little camera shake as well. So if that's something that any of you are sensitive to, now might be a good time to look away for a second. So we're gonna move around. It's like we're dancing, chat. So what we're gonna see over here now is the controller there on the desk. And underneath here, some switches that we use for steering, and the pedal down below that we're going to use for gas. So what we're going to play here in a minute is Rocket League. But first, I want to take you through the digital Xbox accessories app that you see here on the screen. Because what this allows us to do is actually configure all of the different combinations that we can use in our controller. So for example, you can see a number of profiles available here on the side that we've put together, and all of them with different combinations. Because yes, you can plug in a button for everything that you might need. That turns out to be 19 buttons. That may be too many for a user. And so what we've built in are a number of different ways that you can control the way that the buttons are read. So here we have all the defaults. I can go in and I can change any one of these ports to be any control that I like. What is really special about this, though, is the shift ability, where I can actually assign two functions to the same port, and then I can designate another button to be the shift button. And that will allow me to have a single button serve two purposes, which can be adjusted using any other button. And what that allows us to do is essentially reduce the number of required buttons by half, which from an affordability standpoint, from a usability standpoint, is a fantastic direction to be able to go. Once we've built our profile, we can assign it to the profiles, which are represented here on the device with this button and this LED. And that way we can move quickly between different users or different game setups, depending on how you're using the device. So in this case, I've got it set up for Rocket League, which is in our one slot on the profile. And this is specifically designed to be used without hands. And so what I will do is I'm actually going to use this pedal to go and these buttons to steer. Now, for those of you who may be unfamiliar with Rocket League, it is essentially car soccer. So the goal is to get the ball in the net, which can be difficult. We find people tend to aim for the edge of the ball, not the center of it, which is where you'll notice that my car oftentimes will slide underneath it. These limitations can create some really wonderful experiences if we embrace them. So by having different interfaces available, that might just drift in on its own. There we go. You'll notice my hands have stayed here the whole time. I'm able to play the game successfully using a completely different setup than would be considered traditional. And this can be truly empowering for gamers that may not have had the option to play before. And this is just one way in which you can use the adaptive controller. People always ask us, how many different configuration options are there? And I would say, well, how many different gamers with disabilities are there? And how many different games are there? And if you multiply all that together, you might start to get close. But we're talking, I would think, roughly billions, if not trillions of different combinations. That's the power and the beauty of having the adaptive controller in a hardware system that we literally can plug switches into in the back, as we have here, and then quickly digitally adjust on our screen to be able to play any game that we like. So moving on from gaming, we're actually going to approach some productivity and education. So on to station 2. So we're going to talk about Immersive Reader. That's what we've got here on the studio. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with it, Immersive Reader is one of the many learning tools that are available through Office and Edge. There's a new periodic table of learning tools that came out just this morning that lists all of the wonderful cascades of things that are available. And I can give you the link to find that later at the end if you'd like. But what Immersive Reader does is it allows users to really focus in on language. It helps remove distractions. It assists with focus. So what does that look like in practice? Well, you don't know this about me, but I'm not actually from a tech background. My background is in Shakespeare, research and performance. So for this, we're going to talk about Shakespeare a bit. A lot of folks that I have met consider it to be very difficult language to filter through, to understand, to interpret. Now, if you're someone who also has a difficult time focusing or recognizing parts of speech, that becomes even harder to break through. So what we're going to do here is I've got a scene from Julius Caesar. For the sake of ease, it's not in verse, it's in prose, so we don't have to worry about syllable counts and things like that. But what I've done is I've got a speech here, and we're going to look at it in Immersive Reader. So I've got it pulled up on a web page. This is the MIT Shakespeare website. I'm going to simply select the text that I want, which will be this whole speech. I'm going to right-click on the selection. And you'll notice here, there's an option in the middle that says Open in Immersive Reader. And as soon as I do that, the text changes. And so what we have here now is a very large, easy to read text, which I can change the background colors if I like. So if I either visually or from a cognitive standpoint do better with a certain display color, we'll go with that. I particularly love the black background. So I'm going to stick with that for the moment. We can also change the size of the text. So you'll notice here as I move this slider up and down, the text increases with it as well. So depending on how dense the text I want to see, I can make it quite small, or if I really want to be able to focus in on the words individually, we can make it quite large, whichever helps our understanding of the language best. I'm actually going to reduce it just a touch. And then from there, if we want to isolate particular parts of speech, say we're really, we may be struggling with recognizing nouns or verbs, we can activate that here as well. And that will highlight each verb that we see, which is great. Also, if we're looking at Shakespeare's linguistic patterns, we can see what verbs he reuses or what nouns he's relying on, or which type of adjectives this speech is laced with. So for example, let's turn on the adjectives. And if we were doing verse, we could actually split it out in syllable counts as well to help us figure out how to pronounce things, to understand how many beats are in a particular line, also just to assist with comprehension as well. So we'll leave the syllables turned on and we'll look at the adjectives. Silent, better, judge, fortunate, ambitious, valiant. Lots of stirring emotional adjectives that he's using in this case. But this is still a wall of text and it can still be intimidating. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to turn on line focus. And this will allow us to look at chunks of text, smaller parts of it at a time. So rather than having to look at the entire text all at once, we can now look at 5, 3, or even a single line at a time. And that allows us to really, really drill in on what we're seeing here. I'm going to go with 3 lines just to give us a little more context. And I'm going to switch over to nouns. And we'll look at that. Now, Shakespeare's plays were written to be performed, not read. And we find in our Shakespeare research that when people hear the text, it helps with comprehension and cognition. And so for individuals who also retain text better by hearing it, read aloud is an amazing function that's available inside Immersive Reader as well. So let's give it a listen.
Romans, countrymen, and lovers, hear me for my cause, and be silent, that you may hear. Believe me for mine honour, and have respect to mine honour, that you may believe.
It's an AI voice, but she does a pretty good job with it. Now, if it was verse, it'd be a little different. There'd be some pauses and things like that, but it brings the text alive. It brings it back to the way that it's meant to be interacted with, and also can be really helpful with comprehension. That's just one of the many learning tools that are available. As I said, there are many more available across other programs, OneNote, Outlook, all of the Office suite, Edge, tons of things available. I encourage you to go and explore those more, and I will drop that link in the chat at the end so that you can find those features. So that's education. That's our cognitive, one of our cognitive tools that's available. Now I'd like to transition over to look at a number of vision features that we have. So on to the next scene. All right. Okay. So, hi. We are looking at vision-specific features here in our ease of access settings. So from the settings, we go down here to ease of access. Get that a little more focused for you. There we go. All right. And from underneath the ease of access settings, you'll see that it divides up into vision, hearing, interactions. We'll talk about interactions later, but for now, let's focus on vision. Now, I don't know about you, we've got this blown up quite large as it is, but I cannot see the mouse very well. It gets lost on big or small screens as your cursor doesn't necessarily scale as much. And that can be one of the hardest things, is losing your place on the desktop. And if you have limitations to your site as well, that becomes a much bigger barrier. So as we get into the mouse pointer settings, number one, we can simply adjust the scale of the pointer right here, and it suddenly becomes much more visible just by being larger. But there are a number of color options as well to help with location, with comprehension. So we can change to an all black cursor if we so choose. We can change to a negative cursor, which alters based on what it's highlighted over. So you'll see there as we're moving around inversions of colors. Or we can simply pick a custom color from our pointer list, something that's highly visible, easy to see, and easy to work with. So in this case, I've gone with a gold color, and I'm going to reduce the pointer just a little bit. We'll go down to an 11. So still visible, still easy to see, but now in a nice bright color and at a large size. You can even custom colors if you so choose. So if there's one that you really see well, you can pick that up. And then we actually, we've got touch feedback turned on as well. So as we're clicking through, or as I'm touching, you'll see that raindrop pop up where I have contact to make it much easier to see what I'm locating by touch or by mouse. Now, we talked a little bit about the negative, but there's some really wonderful features that have been in Windows for a long time to help with visual identification of information on the screen. One of the oldest is high contrast. And what that allows us to do is really optimize the difference between the brights and the darks on the screen. So give it a second to reset. Here we are in high contrast setting number 1, black background. Everything has been highlighted, very easy to see in this setting. But there are multiple ways that you can adjust it. We have different presets as well that use different color schemes. Again, if there are certain colors that you see better than others. We also have a pure black and white or a white and black. Some people see better with a darker background. Some people see better with a lighter background. Both of those are available as well. And even within each of these settings, you can choose custom colors based on what you are working with. So hyperlinks, text, button texts, all of that. But let's say you don't necessarily need a full high contrast view. Maybe you just have difficulty seeing certain colors. I, for example, am a green weak in my vision. So when we go to color filters, you can actually turn that on to help adjust what you see on the screen. So I've switched over here to our regular backdrop because it's nice and colorful. So you can see it, the color changes here as we go through these. So if I turn on color filters, it automatically is going to shift to whatever the last one was that we selected. But let's look at an inverted color. So this is that negative feature again. Or grayscale. Or grayscale inverted. So depending on your interpretation, on your reception of color, any one of these may be more useful. Or if you've got a specific color group blindness, we have the 3 big ones here. Let's say a blue-yellow, or red-green with red weak, or red-green with green weak, which is what I use. So this suddenly, the red in this really pops for me now. It's just another one of those nice preset options available to make it easier for people to interpret information visually on the screen. Specifically information that's derived through color settings. And now we're going to look at magnifier. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we've already got the screen blown up to the highest resolution and the highest zoom that we can get it. But that may not be enough still. And so what magnifier allows us to do is essentially take a magnifying glass to portions of the desktop and of the window and look at different information through there. So we're going to turn magnifier on, and we get this nice box up here with these controls. Now, right now it's set at 100%. So it's just showing desktop as is. But if I want to increase it, I can simply plus it up, and you'll notice all of a sudden it jumps to 200%. And then it's set right now to follow my mouse cursor. So as I move around, magnifier will also move with me. Now you can set it up in a number of different ways. You can have it docked on the screen so it stays in the same place. You can have it move independently. So as if you say need to scroll through a lot of text, you can just have that window set up and move it down as you're scrolling through. There's another new fantastic feature that's been added to magnifier recently, which is read aloud, which is going to be very similar in some ways to what we saw with Immersive Reader, and also in some ways to narrator, though it uses a different sort of structure and a hierarchy to do it. But I'm going to turn that on, and then I will select.
Zoom in on parts of your display. Magnifier can run in full screen, in a separate window, or as a lens that follows your mouse pointer around the screen.
So it uses the same background that narrator does. It operates the same way. It's the same controls and commands and everything that we would find in narrator, just in combination with the magnifier tools. These can be really powerful features in combination for users who need them. We rarely find that a user only uses one accessible technology. Oftentimes, issues require a blended, layered approach to a solution. So each of these is a tool in that toolbox that we use to help individuals have greater access to information and technology. So that's a little bit of the very deep accessible features that are built into Windows and Office. Now we want to switch gears just a little bit again and look at a hardware feature, what we're going to call sort of our alternate input section. And so we're going to move over to that next, and then I'll explain more from there. Okay. All right. So what we're going to talk about next is eye gaze. And what this will do is this will empower us to be able to navigate through the system without physically interacting with the device. So for individuals who cannot manipulate a keyboard and mouse physically, there is now technology available that will track eye movements and use that to interact with the system. So for this, you'll get to see my hands here on the counter the whole time, just to make sure that there's no confusion about what is controlling the device. So I'm going to turn on eye control, and it uses this eye tracker. This is a Tobii 4C. Full disclosure, I came to Microsoft from Tobii, so I'm very familiar with these products. And it's just plugged in, uses its own software, and it empowers us to use our Microsoft eye control to navigate a computer. So I'm going to turn that on, and you'll notice here at the top, a series of buttons just popped up. And as I go along, we'll talk them through. So I'm going to pause first. Nope, I can't. I want to tell you about these buttons. But you'll notice every time I look at it, it starts to select. So I'm going to try and do this without looking. As we move along, on the left is the position button of the toolbar, and that allows us to move it to the top or the bottom, depending on where you need the focus. Next, we've got a left and a right click button. And then after that, we've got mouse positioning. So say you're trying really hard and you're having difficulty getting a particular link, you can fine maneuver the mouse, focus over it. Next is scrolling. And then there's a full keyboard that is gaze enabled. There is a speech function, your start menu, your task view, your settings, and so on. There's also a pause button, which is really powerful if you're looking at a news article, for example, that has links in it, but you don't want to be clicking on the links, you just want to be able to read it. You can actually pause the eye gaze and interpret the information you need to, and then unpause it and move back into it. So what I'm going to do is actually, we're going to navigate a website. So here, my hands, right? I'm going to open task view. I'm going to select left click, and I'm going to select edge. Now that opens up my edge window for me. Here's the problem though, I can't get to the address bar because of where the tools are positioned. So I'm actually going to go over here and move the toolbar to the bottom. I'm going to select mouse again. I'm going to click in the address bar. And then I'm going to open the keyboard. I'm going to delete what's in there. And I'm going to start typing with my eyes. Now for double letters, you have to look at it, look away, and look back in order to get it to register as a second click. So Toby Gaming is what I want to search for, but you'll notice I've got a series of word predictions here along the top and things like that. So I don't have to type everything out completely. And if I've looked at this before, it'll pop up in my search history just like anything else. So I'm going to close the keyboard. I'm going to select the mouse again. I'm going to click on the search term that I want. And there's the Toby Gaming website that pops up. So again, to the mouse, we're going to click on the link. Now I don't need the address bar, so I want to maximize my reading section. So I'm actually going to move the bar again, the toolbar, and now here we are on the website. Because eye gaze is not just about productivity and access, it also has some really enriching uses for gaming and communication and a number of other things. So now I'm going to select the scroll bar, just click anywhere on the page, and it's very faint, but there's this series of buttons that pop up here that will allow me to navigate and scroll through the page just by looking up or down. So as we move down, oh, there's a new tracker, the Toby Eye Tracker 5. Let's say I want to learn more about that. I'll close the scroller, pick the mouse button again, put it on the button. And now it'll take us to that page. Now, there are things like dwell time. So you see I have to stare at something for a certain amount of time before it shrinks in. That can be adjusted. There are lots of ways to adjust calibration. So this can really be fine-tuned to the end user. And as people get more and more familiar with this sort of technology, we find that that dwell time becomes a lot shorter. There are actually options where you can swipe words with your eyes just like you would with a finger. So it is possible to be rapid with this communication, but it does take time. Learning a new input always takes a lot longer than we think it should. But that, in a nutshell, is eye gaze or eye control. So I think with that, we are at time. So I just want to thank all of you for your time and attendance here.
Due parole, poi se Francesca, se vorrai anche tradurle in modo che gli amici di Microsoft
Per questo
possano...
lasciamo spazio a Manuela, è più brava di me.
Ah, ok, perfetto.
Mi major minor cessat.
Va benissimo. No, era giusto per dire che questo intervento è stato fortemente voluto. È stato fortemente voluto perché c'è una piccola storia dietro. Marzo, stavo seguendo nottetempo un evento di Microsoft nel quale avevano fatto proprio questo, cioè un virtual tour nel Tech Inclusion Lab. Sarà stato mezzanotte e mezza perché era un evento sul fuso orario di Seattle, cioè il loro. Vedo questo tour e scrivo su WhatsApp a Stefano dicendo no, questa cosa dobbiamo averla. Dobbiamo averla. E il punto che mi colpì tantissimo è che sì, abbiamo visto eye gazing, quindi usare gli occhi per comandare la macchina, interagire con la macchina, è una cosa che abbiamo visto fare per esempio a Stephen Hawking. Abbiamo visto il narrator, il magnifier affinché fosse più grande il testo, però abbiamo visto anche il lavoro che stanno facendo sul pad della Xbox. E questo, secondo me, è importante perché uno dei temi che cerchiamo di promulgare come Accessibility Days è che, ok, non usiamo la tecnologia solo a scopo di sopravvivenza, cioè il documento deve essere accessibile, l'app deve essere accessibile, il sito, ma poi la vita è fatta anche di una parte ludica, di cose che con la, tra virgolette, sopravvivenza non hanno niente a che vedere. Infatti domani, esattamente come l'anno scorso, avremo ospiti gli amici di Novice Games e una presenza storica, soprattutto quando abbiamo potuto fare le attività, gli eventi offline, è stata quella di Ivan Venturi, e quindi vedere che il mondo sta usando la tecnologia a scopo di inclusione anche per la parte ludica, quella che dà, vogliamo dire, il sale della vita, per usare un'espressione italiana, beh, è una cosa che per noi è molto importante e volevamo davvero che una presenza come quella che abbiamo appena visto facesse vedere quanto comunque si sta andando in quella direzione, che è una direzione importante. Ecco,
Okay.
tutto piccolo dietro le quinte, ecco.
I see. Okay. I'll translate to Janelle and Amos Miller if he is in online. There is a little story behind our desire, very big desire to have Inclusive Tech Lab in this event. It was in March when Andrea Saltarello watched a TV or an online event organized.
Sorry, it was actually, I don't want to spoil any NDA, but it was the MVP Summit. So that is the summit of the Microsoft Most Valuable Professional that was held online back in March.
Okay. And it was late in the night, and around midnight, because the time was that of I think Seattle maybe, and so one of the features was a virtual tour of the Inclusive Tech Lab. And immediately when Andrea saw that, he sent a WhatsApp message to Stefano and saying, we need to have it. We need to have it because, of course, we've seen eye gazing, so using eyes to interact with the machine, which is great, incredible. We saw narrator, magnifiers, and so on. But what is really innovative, it is something that we really want to get through, to develop as a concept, is that we don't have to have accessible technology only to survive. We want to have accessible leisure activities and games. And I think that the Inclusive Tech Lab is exactly going this way. That's why we really wanted to have this kind of presentation in the Accessibility Days. Okay?
Fantastic. And we agree with that completely. That in addition to productivity, the ability to be able to express ourselves in a variety of different ways is so important to us as people.
E sono assolutamente d'accordo. Al di là del concetto di produttività, c'è proprio il diritto a esprimere noi stessi.
Esattamente, grande cuore.
Big heart.
Ciao, sono Andrea Biraghi e sono Head of Design in Docebo.
Ciao, sono Valentina Bulgheroni e sono Senior Product Designer Accessibility Expert in Docebo.
Siamo davvero molto orgogliosi di essere sponsor degli Accessibility Days anche per quest'anno. In Docebo diamo vita a esperienze formative per più di 2000 clienti in tutto il mondo, con la nostra suite, che è molto semplice da utilizzare e su base di intelligenza artificiale. Docebo si è quotata in borsa recentemente, negli ultimi anni, è stata nominata tra le migliori soluzioni learning SaaS ed è una realtà in fortissima crescita.
Temi come l'accessibilità e l'inclusione fanno parte della nostra cultura aziendale. Crediamo fermamente che siano tra i motori per portare innovazione e qualità online. Il nostro impegno per creare un'esperienza di apprendimento accessibile cresce ogni giorno di più. Il team di design quotidianamente progetta con l'accessibilità in mente funzionalità del nostro LMS, gli sviluppatori del team di UX Engineering lavorano per assegnare semantica a ogni componente del nostro design system e tutto il team di Quality Assurance testa con cura l'esperienza della tastiera e dello screen reader.
Siamo pienamente coscienti che ogni persona utilizza la tecnologia in modo davvero diverso e che le strategie per accedere ai contenuti web sono molteplici, no? In questo contesto l'accessibilità diventa davvero uno strumento per non discriminare nessuno e creare poi un'esperienza che possa realmente essere funzionale ed inclusiva per tutti.
È per questo che siamo molto orgogliosi di sostenere eventi come le Accessibility Days, che contribuiscono a portare visibilità a tutte queste tematiche e soprattutto permettono di condividere esperienze e conoscenza.
Se volete scoprire qualcosa in più su Docebo, seguiteci sulla nostra pagina LinkedIn. Potrete rimanere aggiornato su tutte le nostre novità, ma soprattutto scoprire le nostre opportunità di carriera. Ciao e alla prossima, buon Accessibility Days!
Ciao a tutti, buon Accessibility Days!
Ciao ciao!